Welcome back, and we are excited to have Jeff Francis talking a little bit about mixing in the ATEM. I think most people think of the ATEMs as switchers, but they also have. We have to remember that BlackMagic bought Fairlight and then took a lot of Fairlight's tools and put them everywhere. So BlackMagic still makes Fairlight hardware, but they've incorporated Fairlight into Resolve, of course, but they've also incorporated a lot of those Fairlight tools into the ATEM switchers of all sizes. So even if you're having a little ATEM Mini, the smallest one, it's got some Fairlight tools in it, and it just those Fairlight tools keep expanding as the switchers get bigger. And Jeff has a quick overview of how all of that works. Why don't you take it away, Jeff?
I was just thinking about how ATEM, we've discussed all along the lines of this, that ATEM's not an acronym. It's just a word. But
it's an Egyptian god.
Okay, well, if it's an acronym, I think Alex might agree that the acronym would probably be Audio to External Mixer. You should always use your audio in an external mixer. But we're going to talk about the audio capabilities that the ATEM line has. And there's a whole breadth of ATEM lines out there. And so I've got a Mini connected to the system, and we'll talk about that and actually open up the software and that. But ATEM goes a whole bunch of stretches, and I kind of want to talk about a few things, one of which is the physical, as we would say, the gazindas and the gazoutas. Like, how do we get audio into and out of various ATEM mixers, and what are our options there? How do we deal with delay so that we can sync our audio with video? And then also, what are the actual capabilities of the audio within the software, the Fairlight software? So what are our options for getting audio into ATEM? Well, the ideal option is to bring it in when it's already digital and it's already embedded into the video signal. So we're talking about HDMI or SDI in that case. So that's going to need to go in via the camera. So your audio comes into a camera and it's already HDMI or SDI. Or it's going to need to come in through some kind of audio embedder. So here's a BlackMagic SDI audio embedder. So SDI goes in and SDI comes out, and you can have it choose to embed audio either in the form of line level analog, so then you're dealing with the converters that are in this box, or it can take AES EBU digital audio. I will tell you, I've used this technique, and I've actually had problems where the channels swapped when, in rebooting the system and HDI reconnected or SDI reconnected. I was going HDMI to SDI into the SDI embedder box, back to HDMI into an HDMI Mini Extreme. And depending on the day, left would come up as left, or another day left would come up as right, and then you'd repower the embedder and you'd get things in the correct order. So I will give you that to watch out for. I think that's a sync connection in the digital system. SDI has and HDMI have many channels of audio. SDI has up to 16 channels of audio, and as far as I know, with at least the lower levels of the ATEM Mini, we're dealing with just the first 2 channels. Someone else on here can speak, maybe Mickey, to how many channels of SDI audio can you pull off of the SDI inputs on larger ATEM switchers? Can you access...
On the bus that actually feeds the program input, you can only pull channels 1 and 2 of each SDI input, but you can embed channels 1 and 2, or 3 and 4 into an SDI output. That's like, say, if you have a camera that has a reporter mics on channels 1 and 2, and then maybe a top mic for NAT sound on 3 and 4, you can pull 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and send that to an output on the ATEM. But within the actual ATEM's mixer, say on the Constellation line, you can only utilize channels 1 and 2 of each SDI input going into the program bus.
So while the SDI input can support up to 16 channels, you really can only access the first two in the program mixer. And BlackMagic uses 15 and 16 for comms return audio back to cameras if you have SDI going back to cameras. So we have the choice of HDMI, SDI, and then when we get into the minis, we have the wonderfully contested analog inputs of the minis, which they write as down here as mic inputs, which is a misnomer because they're switchable in the software. So these are 3.5 millimeter, 1/8 inch TRS. So there's 3 contacts in there. It is a stereo input, so it is always unbalanced. And it can either be mic level, or it can be line level, or it can be mic level with camera power, 5-volt mic power. So that is an option for bringing actual pro line level audio in here, but we're going to need to do something that will translate that audio from pro line level balanced +4, usually on an XLR, into 1/8 inch consumer level unbalanced. So the ART CleanBox Pro is a really common option for this. Here we have 2 inputs with some level control, and then on the output we do have that unbalanced output. So maybe not the ideal method of dealing with audio. I'm an audio guy. I don't want my audio to go through unbalanced consumer level, but the audio you're hearing right now from me is actually going into that mic level input on the Mini, and we'll get into the software about how to do the settings on that. Similar options for outputs. Now, when you get up into higher level ATEMs, they will have Pro XLR inputs on them. An interesting thing that I've found is those are actually pin 3 hot. So the ATEM that I've gone into, Mickey makes a face for that. Opposite is flipping the polarity from my mixing console, which is Pro pin 2 output, and then going in Pro line level XLR, and it's flipping that audio to be inverse polarity, so I have to rewire my cables. But that allows me to get Pro audio from an external mixer correctly into my ATEM mixer, and that's a ME1. I can't remember which level it is, but it's a higher level than the minis. So then let's think about audio outputs, similar options. We've got HDMI or SDI, and so you need to go through some other device if you want to monitor this. So usually coming off of a program monitor. The ATEM Mini Extreme does have the same number of inputs, but it actually adds a headphone output. So you do get some kind of monitor on the output of an ATEM Mini Extreme, which the ATEM Mini does not give you. And most of the higher level ATEMs have an actual monitor output, usually on XLR Pro level. And then thinking about sync. The Mini has in the software, and let me see if I can share. All right, so here is the ATEM Mini software. You're probably used to seeing that view right there. And then if we go to the audio tab, you can see that we have the Fairlight mixer, and we do have the option of setting sync delay, which is in 0 to 8 frames. That is only on these analog inputs. So you notice that there's no option on any of the other inputs to change sync. So if you're coming in from embedded audio, the assumption is that the camera embedded audio is already correct. You've embedded audio in the camera, or you're using your audio mixer and you're dealing with that elsewhere. So some encoders, encoding for streaming, will have the ability to adjust delay between the analog and the the audio and the video inputs. but the encoder built into the ATEM Mini series does not. So if you don't have the audio synced correctly going into one of the HDMI inputs, you can't fix it if you're encoding using the streaming in the ATEM mixer. And if you are using one of the analog inputs, you do get that up to 8 frames, 1 frame at a time delay, but that's as precise as it gets.
It's funny. It actually the little computer graphics pot that's there it gives you increments that are lower than, that are smaller than it's not like it clicks from one frame to another. It lets you smoothly change it. So we're assuming that it's actually changing sub frame, accuracy, but it just says 1 frame, 2 frame, 3 frames. So I'm not sure exactly whether it's not super precise.
Yeah, I think it's just clicking into the frame.
Is it?
And
yeah.
And because as you can move it in between, but then it jumps to be in whatever position is there. And I have had funny behavior with that control. So each of the inputs in the Fairlight mixer, in the ATEM Mini, or any of the ATEM line series, you can split them and get stereo control, or you can get individual mono control. And if you do it split and you set the delays different and then you return it back to stereo, you can get some funny behaviors going on between the channels. I've had some funny behaviors recalling previous XML setups. So that's something that I would definitely recommend everyone double check the delay settings in there, especially if you're using a stereo input and you've at any time had a mono input. You don't want to throw one of your channels with 1 frame of delay and another one with 3 frames of delay and throw the timing off between your channels. That can be a huge, huge problem. Interestingly enough, the actual delay capability of the analog inputs doesn't carry on into the higher levels of the ATEM. Once you get into the Pro XLR inputs, as far as I know, there's no delay capability. The assumption is you're using a Pro mixer, which you're dealing with delay elsewhere. So the Mini line tries to incorporate a lot of capability into a very small space, but it does handicap a lot of that.
Bradley Perigo from Wakefield. And Bradley asks, how can I get the best audio for a mixer into the ATEM Extreme Mini? I seem to struggle with audio from mixers as it comes in too quiet. I recently purchased a 2-channel line converter, the CleanBox Pro, but it came in even quieter and not clean. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I'd probably utilize an audio to either analog or digital audio to SDI embedder, and then convert that SDI feed to HDMI and feed it digitally into the ATEM Extreme or ATEM Mini. That would provide a nice, clean digital path into the ATEM Mini and avoid the not so great analog circuitry within the ATEM products.
Jeff?
If you want to see if you can get the CleanBox Pro working, Mickey's option is definitely going to be better audio because you're removing analog to digital conversion from inside the ATEM Mini. But if you're stuck with working with that, the first thing I would do is to get tone out of your mixer and to set it at a nice operating level, which is probably going to be something like 18 dB minus 18 dB FS, so 18 dB below clipping, and put that into the CleanBox Pro. And then make sure that your settings of your ATEM Mini are correct. So this is probably a good time while we're talking about this to talk about settings in the ATEM Mini. So I'm going to share that again. If you're on the ATEM Mini software control and you go to the little gear for settings, there's an audio page. On that audio page, you have 2 pages, the first of which just allows you to simply split every stereo input. So this is an ATEM Mini Pro ISO. So, sorry, not ISO, just ATEM Mini Pro. So we have 4 camera inputs, HDMI. Each of them have stereo audio with them that I can split into 2 monos. And then I have the 2 analog inputs that ATEM calls mic, but they can be mic or line. And then on the second page, you get the option to choose whether those inputs are microphone level with power. This is not phantom power, this is plug-in power, or if they're line level. So make sure that you're on line level here, but it sounds like you are, otherwise you would not be getting quiet audio. But the fact that you're saying it's not clean makes me think you might be. So that would be definitely something to check, is to make sure that you're on line level audio. And then once you've done that, come to your mixer page and see what the level is on the meter of that mic input where you have the CleanBox Pro connected. And leaving the analog gain set at 0, change the level on the CleanBox Pro so that you get -18 here in the ATEM Mini.
Go ahead, Mickey.
So this is this.
Sorry, I jumped too quickly. Go ahead, Jeff.
No, it's all right. Let me turn off the screen share and just go back to the picture of the ATEM Mini. So there's your level control on the CleanBox Pro, which is what you want to adjust as you're watching that level. And then I would probably take your tone generator, because it's very easy to hear distortion on simple 1K tone, and I'd raise it up to 2 dB or 1 dB below clipping. See that you get the similar level on ATEM Mini and that it still does not have any harmonic distortion. So what will harmonic distortion sound like? It'll change from a pure tone to having all kinds of harmonics, so you will hear it turn more into a square wave. Go ahead, Mickey, sorry.
And I can't overstate how important it is to be able to add tone anywhere in your chain. Middle, front, back, to understand where, what things are going. And tone is such a valuable tool. Go ahead, Mickey.
Certainly, calibrate your systems beforehand. And there's a reason why when you step into a control room or a broadcast truck at the start of the day of a broadcast day, you'll hear tone everywhere because everyone's lining up everything, all the systems from point A to point B to C, D, all the way until it gets to the final transmission. An alternative to the Art CleanBox Pro, I'm also a fan of the Radial Engineering J ISO. Again, big Radial Engineering fan here. But yeah, calibrate all the way, not only with analog segments of interconnects, but also with digital. There are many instances where, people leave something at a different level from the previous show, the previous broadcast, previous production. Check that everything aligns all the way through. It's also good to note that if you're just feeding the front of house mix to a broadcast system, a front of house mix is typically extremely quiet compared to the loudness or level that you would expect from a broadcast. So in broadcast mixes, you typically have a louder overall mix, a lot more dynamic range compression to control that mix. So if you're just feeding that front of house mix into your ATEM, you might expect it to be a little quiet.
Go, Jeff.
Also, if this is a house of worship situation where you have music and spoken word, the mix that's coming out for front of house is going to be vastly different than what you want for video record or for streaming, in that music is typically going to be loud and speech is going to be quiet. So you need the ability to have, and this is going beyond the ATEM Mini, but you need the ability to have a separate mix where you can balance things differently, potentially add in some room sound, and make sure that you have that sort of mastering that Mickey's talking about, getting your overall level up, which is not the case of what an front of house mixer output direct is going to be.
Good, Mickey.
And yeah, I'm just going to very quickly share a screen here, and I want to show the options available for us too. I know this about audio with ATEM, but I'm also going to show you how to get audio out of the ATEM into board. So if you have a situation wherein you have SDI feeds with audio embedded into it, with the larger ATEMs, you can send those the embedded SDI audio out via MADI and also out through your SDI outputs. Um, Assigning what goes out to your SDI outputs is a relatively new feature and a firmware release for the ATEMs that came out a couple months ago. And we're seeing here the ATEM software control for a Constellation 8K. This is the actual constellation that this show is being cut on. So I'm not going to touch anything on this page because Michael Smith is going to yell at me. So if you want to select what goes out of your SDI outputs, you can go into the audio tab here and you can say like, okay, out of SDI audio 3 and 4, I want to send input 9's channel 1 and 2. And I'm not going to click this because I don't want to mess up the show, although I don't think anything's routed there. But you can see here how you can assign what goes out of the SDI
It's interesting that
outputs.
it still stays in pairs. So you can't go one channel to one channel. It's always going to be a pair of channels.
Yes, everything within the ATEM are in pairs, including the MADI inputs and outputs. So if we go into our audio tab here, you can see, well, that's my audio coming in through input 12, although that channel is not currently enabled because we are embedding into the ATEM through the XLR inputs, or rather through the quarter-inch inputs. But that's my microphone coming in through input 12 there. But if we scroll down the list of these SDI inputs, we will see our MADI inputs, and these are also in pairs, 2-channel pairs from each input. And similar to the ATEM Minis, you can go into the audio tab here, and you can split those 2-channel SDI audio inputs into inputs 1 and 2 of each SDI input, or audio 1 and 2 of each SDI input. And the same deal with your MADI inputs. You can split MADI 1, which is 2 channels, split it into MADI 1.
And what's interesting about this is that it still displays itself as stereo. You know, like in the mixer, when you split it, it doesn't just give you one. It still displays it as a stereo, but it's actually you're having an individual control over mono tracks once it's been split.
And if I say go into split audio 16 here, or what output am I on? I'm on input 12. If I split 12, which is my channel here, if I go down here, there 12, that it's showing now as 2 separate faders for 12. So here's one fader, and then here's another fader again with the meters of 2 channels. But I believe it is affected by your panning. So if I pan this one all the way left and I pan this one all the way right, you can see there that they're no longer coming out on both sides there. But just going back to de-embedding out of the ATEM, we can see here, this is just the documentation on the ATEMs. We can see what goes out of there are 2 MADI outputs on the Constellation 8K. We can see how they are assigned in terms of what goes out of MADI 1 in different modes. This is an 8K mode, and then they have separate modes for HD, Ultra HD. And these are the assignments there for the different resolution modes, as well as what goes out of MADI 2. So this is how you're able to get embedded SDI audio out of an ATEM, either through the SDI outputs or through the MADI outputs. Of course, you can also re-embed back into the ATEM using the MADI inputs. So just wanted to share that as well. Digital paths in and out, digital paths for audio in and out of the ATEM, as opposed to using the analog sources.
And if you're using MADI as an input for one of the larger switchers, do you need to then make sure that you're providing reference, to make sure that it stays clocked?
That is a good question. Well, if there are 2 MADI inputs, my assumption, that's a good question because I haven't had to utilize more than a single MADI in and out. My assumption is that the ATEM would reclock it. But that's certainly something that should be tested.
Yeah. Good, Jeff.
So MADI is multi-channel audio digital interface. typically 56 or 64 channels, depending on which mode it's running in. And it's basically a big brother of AES EBU, which is why the pairing of channels. AES EBU is stereo down a single connection that sends left channel, then right channel, left channel, then right channel, one sample at a time. And so MADI does the same kind of thing, but sends 64. But it's basically it's 32 AES pairs stuck together, which is why everything happens in pairs. And I think SDI is also taken from that, which is why you see all this pairing, things that happen always in pairs.
Next question.
Rion Smith in Trinidad, West Indies. Up next, I watched a video where a guy said to use the phono out RCA jacks from the Mackie Pro FX V2 mixer into the ATEM as the best option. Is this your guys' views as well?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, just get you an 1/8 inch to RCA plug, and most of those smaller mixers that have tape out on RCA pins have line level, unbalanced line level out, and so you set your ATEM input to stereo unbalanced line level input, and it should work.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, I think Courtney got it. It's the correct level already. So again, just confirm that you've set the ATEM Mini to have it set as a line level input, and it's already consumer line level unbalanced stereo. Just need a right adapter cable.
Good, Mickey.
Yeah, exactly what they said. This is exactly the same thing that we're doing with the Art Clean Box Pro or the Radial J ISO. We're taking professional line level down to consumer line level unbalanced signals.
Next question.
Robert Sababity in Poland. When using an ATEM Mini Extreme for a hybrid event, is there a way of configuring a mix minus within the ATEM Mini? I'm looking for a way to minimize the amount of equipment required for production.
Jeff?
No, and this is one of the major problems as an audio person coming to the ATEM Mini and Mini Extreme mixer. If we share this, what we see originally looks like a mixer, right? We have channels left to right. We have a master bus on the right. We have faders. We have pans. We have EQ and dynamics. We have gain at the top. These are all normal things in a mixer, but what is missing? Auxiliaries. There's 0 auxiliary mix buses in the ATEM Mini and ATEM Mini Extreme. You have a single program bus, and that's it. So while you have great capability for the audio that you are sending out in the program bus, you have no capability to do alternate mixes such as a mix minus. There's no capability to do a send to a reverb and a reverb return. So you don't have the capability to add those kind of reverb effects. You only have inline effects, not parallel effects. So it is a very limited mixer.
Good, Mickey.
So yeah, if you are not using your program bus within the ATEM for your actual broadcast and you're embedding the actual program mix from a separate mixing desk elsewhere in the pipeline, you can utilize the program mix within the ATEM as a monitor mix, as a return mix. Alternatively, it's kind of janky, but you can use the headphone output as a sort of a matrix to create a separate mix. So, for example, here I can set my headphone output to I want this channel to go to the headphone output. Oh, I can't. Oh, because the channels are not enabled, I can't do that. But essentially, yes, I can select different channels to go to the headphone output and take that headphone output and send that to your wherever it needs to go for the monitor return. Again, not really designed to do it, kind of janky, but in a pinch, you can make it work.
Next question.
Next question comes to us from Robert Linkram in Belmont Shores, California. On the ATEM Mini Extreme ISO, HDMI, or SDI, how does one turn off the master out bus?
Good, Mickey.
So to turn off the master bus, I'm going to share my screen again. You simply go into the master fader is being covered by Zoom window, which you guys can't see. So to turn it off, you have the fader here. Again, I'm not going to touch it because this is the actual ATEM that is being broadcasted off.
We appreciate that.
Out of. So actually, I'm the one speaking, so I'm going to bring this down, and I should be.
Yeah,
and there.
Yeah.
No, but that's the master out.
Yeah.
Well, you could hear me through Zoom, but what went out to YouTube
for the people watching? Yeah, exactly. People on YouTube are like, "What happened?" Next,
but yeah, bring down the fader.
Next question.
Next question comes to us from Rion Smith in Trinidad, West Indies. What does the Mic+Plug in power option in the mixer settings mean?
Good, Mickey.
So yeah, if you're using like small little electret microphones that use more or less 5 volts, that's what the plug-in power is for. Like say lavalier microphones. I'm just trying to look around if I have any here. Little lavalier microphones, little gooseneck microphones are also electret microphones. So those little microphones that take 5 volts of bias power are what we require that plug-in power setting.
Go, Jeff.
Yeah, I have one here. This was, if you all remember the Pulson and the Pile microphones, the little, $15 headset microphones. This one is the TS version, so it's not got the right connector on it. If I had the TRS, we'd be able to use it and plug it in and get the power. But that's a simple little, these were very inexpensive 2-ear boom headset mics that sounded but for $15 it was a basic good deal. And so Mickey's got one that's showing the TRS connector, but what you get is instead of phantom power, you get a little bit of power for the electret microphone. And that gives you basically that type of microphone into the ATEM Mini.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Craig Kadoki in Toronto. Can we talk a little about AFV, audio follows video, when to use it and when not to use it?
Good, Mickey.
So there are situations where, like for example, larger broadcasts. Let's take a Formula One race or a similar program that takes place in a larger venue, wherein when you cut between camera sources, you may also want to cut to that camera source's audio input. So, for example, you cut to one part of a racetrack in a car race. You want that natural sound from that racetrack to come in. That's a possible reason why you want audio follows video enabled. With that, you of course still want to have, say, your commentary microphones on the air. So you don't want that source to be audio follows video, but you may just want the natural sound to cut in and out as you cut between cameras.
Jeff?
Another place that I use AFV a lot is for like a playback. If I have a laptop that has videos, when I cut to that, I want the audio from that playback to come in. And there's a couple places we can see that on the minis. So if we go into the software, you'll see at the bottom of the channel, there is an on button and there's an AFV button. So that turns that channel on. AFV would bring that audio on when I actually enable that channel. So if I leave this one on, you'll get audio from my iPad, which is playing nothing. But now if I cut to that iPad, that audio will become active because it is AFV, and you see that has become active there. Now
yeah,
I'll turn off the screen.
Okay.
Go ahead.
One of the things that, like, for instance, a good example is if you have a hyperdeck and you want to hit play, you tie that hyperdeck to the input and you have audio follows video, you can be sitting there playing with the hyperdeck and getting it ready to go. But when you cut to it, and when it's set up and you cut to it to do a playback, it's going to switch the audio. It's going to bring that audio up and play out the video all in one button. So that can be useful when it's embedded into the whole system.
Yeah, another place I used that was a regular show that had a separate audio mixer. This was a classical music, multiple cameras, but at intermission we had a host and interviewing people in the lobby when the musicians would come out and sit down with them, and that was a fixed camera with an audio feed, and everything was done out there, and that was a stream all in of itself that we just cut to, and audio follows video, and as soon as we cut to that, we get the sound from that. Quick look at the top of the ATEM Mini Pro mixer, and here you can see the audio controls. This just expands when you have more inputs, but here's channel 1, and above it you have up and down for level. That's sort of a little mini fader on and off, and then the AFV button, and reset will reset everything on that channel. And then above that, first 2 channels are for the mic. And again, they're not mic inputs. Most of the time I use them as line inputs, but the analog audio inputs of the ATEM, you can turn them on and off, and you can change the level. Notice there's no audio follows video on that because those don't have any video to them whatsoever.
And I believe, though, and also for the audio, not the analog audio, but if all the audio is coming in via the video, if you set all of them to all audio follows video, it'll turn the other ones off. so when you cut to whatever video you're in, and one of the things that we've done also is that sometimes we have 2 switchers. We have a big switch. We might have a Constellation, and I might have a 1ME or something smaller that's right in front of my encoder or right in front of transmission. It follows video, and it has a countdown clock, or it has something else there, and it has all these things that are stacked on. It could be music or whatever. But when I hit, that means when I cut to my program, it's going to cut over from whatever I was doing in that in between switcher to my main show. So now and that may be a Constellation with external embedded audio and an FS or whatever. All that stuff. It's an embedded SDI signal going into that switcher. But I use that as a safety mechanism because now I have something right in front of my encoders or right in front of transmission that I hit one button and it's off. Everything turns off. I can set, and I can put, we'll be right back. I can do whatever I need to, but it's a little safety process. And so the audio follows video becomes very valuable to us there. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Douglas Carmichael. When would you use the MADI I/O on the ATEMs instead of feeding a stereo mix to it?
Mickey?
I'm not sure what you mean exactly, Douglas, but because you can feed a stereo mix or many stereo mixes to an ATEM through the
analog.
MADI I/O.
When would you use MADI instead of the analog input to the switcher?
If I have to embed on an ATEM, I don't like running audio through ATEMs or video switchers in general. But if I have to embed into an ATEM and I have the infrastructure to utilize MADI, I'd rather go MADI because it's a digital connection as opposed to doing A to D and then, D to A and then A to D conversion again. It's a nice clean path into a switcher, into the embed.
And what would you use to put things into MADI before you send it? If you want to send MADI to an ATEM, what are the kind of tools that you would use to either convert Dante to MADI or analog to MADI?
Now, most broadcast mixing consoles have MADI I/O built in, so I can send MADI directly out of it into the ATEM for embedding. The same is true with other desks. You can say desks that are more designed for PA purposes. You can add a MADI card to them, so you can send MADI directly out of the board again into the ATEM. But if it has to come from like the Dante realm. There are things like the RME Digiface MADI that can take Dante and convert Dante into MADI, and then you can use that to do the embed.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Bradley Perigo in Wakefield. If we were using a camera with an XLR input, for example, a Sony FX6, do you think it's worth taking the audio from a mixing desk into the camera rather than into the mixer into the ATEM?
Mickey?
The only advantage I would see there is the ability to record a backup of the program mix on camera. But I would, for having like the broadcast pipeline in mind, I'd rather embed, have less steps as possible towards my embed. So skip the whole run it through the camera thing and embed directly into the switcher. That's assuming the switcher has similar analog input capabilities, balanced line level audio inputs.
Courtney?
Even if you're going into an ATEM Mini with the Mini plug into what we talked about earlier, the RCA jacks, if you go in at consumer line level, it should be okay. The problem with going into the XLR inputs on a camera, sometimes those preamps in the camera are not very good. Make sure you set them to line level in if you're going to take your mixer output and feed it into a camera. The other thing to consider is you got to make sure power is always up on that camera. If you have something that's going to overheat and shut down, you're going to lose your entire mix. So if you're running your mixer through the camera and then coming in through the HDMI inputs into your ATEM, bear that in mind and make sure you don't have it on audio follows videos, because if you switch to a different input, you could lose all your audio. So take those into consideration. Also, if you have to do a battery change in that camera, you may lose your audio. So it's better to go directly into the mixer for those reasons.
Jeff?
Yeah, I'm glad Mickey gave the caveat. If you've got the Pro XLR inputs, if you got an ATEM with that Pro input, then I think if you are going to embed it and not go separately and go later into your encoder, then putting it into the XLR Pro inputs is a great option. If I had to choose between the 1/8-inch line level consumer of the ATEM Mini series and a camera, I would probably go with the XLR of the camera. Again, Courtney makes a great caveat. Listen to it and make sure those line inputs of the camera actually can do line input and are not always mic preamp inputs. Another thing that I've done sometimes is I've gone with a complete Dante system that has a Dante Avio. So that's those little 2-channel Avio Dante devices and they make one that does Dante to 2 channels of analog. And in the Dante controller, you can set the output level of that. And then those come out as XLR Pro line level. And I've gone to an adapter that takes one leg of the balanced, and that adapter is 6 inches long. So that's about as short as I can get an unbalanced connection. And that goes 2 XLRs into an 1/8-inch directly plugged into the Mini. And that to me has been the best way to use the ATEM Mini audio input. If you have to use it, is to bring Dante's to within 6 inches of that and then convert and drop down into a consumer level.
Yeah, and beyond how to get it into the mixer, it's very common for us to run audio into many of the cameras, analog audio. If the cameras have analog inputs, oftentimes even running them into one channel, or we sometimes even split a lot of the channels up, the ISO audio mics and everything else, and stick them all into the cameras as these backups. But it also we'll oftentimes put it into the left channel, leave the right channel opened on the camera. And that allows us to adjust for sync or anything else that we might need there. So that's another thing to kind of think about there, is the delivery, but the record. We have gone to the camera record because something happened with our core record. It hasn't happened recently to me, knock on wood, but we have it. The fact that I put audio on so many different things in so many different places has definitely saved us here and there. It's often enough that we keep doing it. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Tommy Shantz in St. Paul, Minnesota. Is there a hardware delay for camera input?
Mickey?
Yeah, if you're talking about delaying just the audio from an SDI source, there are boxes called frame syncs that are capable of doing this. If you're looking to delay the full video feed, audio and video, that's where you go into things like replay systems, EVSs. To an extent, frame syncs can also induce a couple of frames of delay depending on the format, resolution, and also frame rate. But if you're talking about just the audio, frame syncs can add delay.
Jeff?
So I read this question is there an analog or is there an audio delay for the HDMI SDI camera inputs like there is for the analog mic line inputs? And the answer to that is no, there is no audio delay on the camera inputs, only on the analog. And that's only on the Mini series. There's not a delay on the higher series.
Next question.
Rion Smith down in Trinidad wonders, what's the +4 versus -10 dB audio standards issue?
Jeff?
What a great question for an audio day. So we're talking about analog audio and interconnections, and we're talking about measuring the level. And we know that speech and music all changes level all the time, but so these are general operating levels, so kind of an average level. +4 is +4 dBu, and the U is related to 0.775 volts, and the -10 dB is -10 dBV, which is related to 1 volt. So that sounds really confusing, but just remember that dBu and dBV are very similar, but they're actually 2.2 dB off. So there's not a 14 dB difference between those two. There's actually an 11.8 dB difference between those two. So +4 is the standard in the US and most places around the world for pro audio, and that is generally balanced audio, generally on an XLR or a 1/4-inch TRS for every single channel. So if you're going to do stereo, you need 2 separate connectors. And -10 is dBV is consumer level audio. It typically is unbalanced, and it's oftentimes on a 1/8-inch TRS with the left on tip signal and the right on ring and a common ground.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Roscoe Jones in Madison, Indiana. On the ISO Minis, the audio is also ISO recorded at 24-bit 48 kilohertz as WAV files. Would you ever use this as a poor man's multi-channel recorder?
Jeff?
I haven't yet, but I have thought about it. I'm so glad Alex mentions backups and recording audio and cameras, because I'm always thinking about what could possibly go wrong. So a small live stream I do is a 4 cameras with an ATEM Mini, and I have a small Dante audio system. It's a stereo pair, and it's another pair on the piano, and it's another pair for the musicians out front, that I'm mixing all of that via Dante and sending stereo into my Mini. And I'm thinking, well, if my entire Dante system blows up, my mic preamp dies, my computer blows up, whatever might die, could I patch my 2 primary mics into one camera and use the mic preamps in that camera, and 2 other mics on the piano into a second camera, and 2 other mics in front of the musician, the other string quartet, into a third camera, and mix the 3 of those through the ATEM Mini and record it as an ISO, each of those ISO files, and be able to remix it later on with reverb and things? Yes, I could. I haven't yet, but I've thought through that example. You notice that I always said stereo pairs. I think I would keep my stereo pairs to one single camera. I would not separate a left and right channel onto 2 separate cameras, because I would worry that the sync between 2 cameras, because every input coming in is being resynced, I would worry that the sync between the 2 cameras would not be accurate enough for a stereo pair. It would throw off the timing of the stereo pair.
Mickey?
So my hesitation with this is, say, if you bring in multiple sources in via the HDMI or SDI inputs into an ATEM, these different sources would most likely have separate A to D converters that are not most likely not clocked together with the same word clock source. And also, as they come into the ATEM, most ATEMs have frame synchronizers on their inputs that automatically do their frame synchronization without the ability to monitor or control it. So, say if you're capturing an event, a hall, like a band or a concert, and you're bringing in 32 channels into, this would be a smaller ATEM. You're bringing 8 or 16 channels into an ATEM Mini Extreme. All these sources would be clocked differently from each other and would not arrive at perfect sample accurate sync. And that would be a very big issue for me when it comes to mixing all these sources in.
Good, Courtney.
Yeah, like Mickey said, the time code, the way that you would have to sync these files. Now, I don't have an ISO, so I'm not sure. Maybe those of you who have them can tell me. These wave files that it records, are they broadcast wave files, or they have this empty time code for sync? You would have to use the time code that's embedded in the metadata of those wave files to synchronize those individual channels up to put them all in sync as a multi-channel recorder. If they're broadcast wave mono files or broadcast wave stereo files, each input was, as Mickey said, would have its own time base. So the time code, even if they're time code stamped, they wouldn't necessarily be synced up because the time code may be coming from the camera, unless it all coordinates and organizes together and synchronizes to a common house clock. A better way would be just to get you a $600 multi-channel recorder like the Zoom FX6 that has time code, and feed multiple channels into there, and it can record a 6-channel or a 10-channel poly file where all your wave files, all of your digital files are synchronized and together.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, and with the internal recordings on ATEM Minis or ATEM Mini Extremes or the ATEM ISOs, the time code stamp on the files originate from the ATEM itself. But what I was talking about earlier was the actual word clocking, the alignment of the samples between the multiple A to D converters, not so much the time stamping of the files themselves.
And how would that affect the mix for our listeners?
So, say if you have something that is meant to sound in phase, and you have your microphones placed correctly, you have polarity adjusted in your head amp or your mixing console, and they're all nice and aligned coming into your audio system. The moment they reach a point where there are separate analog to digital converters that are not clocked together, and also once they hit those frame synchronizers that automatically shift things back and forth, or actually wait for a full frame before they bring them into the switcher's circuitry, then those nice in phase signals would go out of phase because of the timing differences, and you'll hear phasing in your mix. You'll hear things not becoming fully aligned. Things like lower end elements that have lower end information, like say kick drums, bass guitars, will suddenly sound all muddy and muffled because the multiple sources are no longer aligned.
Jeff?
So in answer to the question, would you use this as a poor man's multi-channel recorder? No, except in cases of extreme emergency. If it was the last resort to save the show, yes. And I would keep stereo pairs on the same camera channel, same video input, so that they would have the same timing between them, because that's where the most damage is going to be. And then hopefully work to have isolation between that. The kick drum is isolated enough from the bass that the phase issues don't come into play. One note about the ISO record. So you get a folder that has the program video. It has the resolve file. It has all of the video ISOs, and it has on each of those video ISOs, the audio on each of those video files is the program audio. And then there's a separate audio file that is all the audio ISOs. So people oftentimes, when they first go looking for this, they look at the ISO record for camera 2, and they expect that to have the audio from camera 2, but you have to actually look in the audio ISOs folder to find the audio for camera 2.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next. Would a DirectOut PRODIGY or similar device be useful for managing ATEM audio I/O in a networked, and he's talking about Dante, SoundGrid, or something similar environment, and he's got a link there.
Mickey?
Yeah, I guess you can route the ins and outs of an ATEM through something like this, an audio matrix, a digital audio matrix of some sort, and sort of use it as a proxy for the ins and outs of the ATEM. But from my point of view, I'd want little to do as possible with audio within video switchers. So extending that and having a proxy in front of it is a moot moot point for me.
Next question.
Roscoe Jones in Madison, Indiana has this one. How does the quality of the power supply affect the quality of the digital signal chain?
Jeff?
So if the digital signal chain is done correctly, the power supply should not affect it, because the digital signal chain should take into account noise from the power supply injecting into the system. And so what we're primarily talking about here is digital jitter, and jitter is very, very small timing inconsistencies in the sample clock. And every digital connection, and then at the final end with the D-to-A converter, that should be retimed to remove jitter so that we have a very steady sample clock. The place where jitter can affect things is in the original capture, because if the samples, which are technically supposed to be exactly evenly spaced, 1/48,000th of a second apart, if they're not exactly evenly spaced, then we can actually grab the audio at different times. You see down in this side that those blue vertical lines are not equally spaced, and so we're actually capturing the waveform at a different time. If that happens in the analog to digital conversion, it is forever stored in your audio, because that you've captured the wrong time, so therefore you've captured the wrong level. So that's where power supply often creates sample clock timing problems. That gives us jitter. And so in especially really high-end A to D converters, the topology of the circuit board is really important, that actually the digital section and the analog section are kept separate from each other. They have their own ground systems. The power supply has its own ground system, and those are connected, but they're also kept away from each other to keep the noise of especially modern switching power supplies out of the clocking system.
Next question.
Next one comes from Rian Smith in Trinidad, West Indies. Again, this time, to remove ground hum, is it best to plug the mixer into its own power supply, like a battery backup, or the ATEM into ISO power, or is there another better solution?
Courtney?
Yeah, running everything off battery is one way to remove AC hum. The ATEM minis will run off of 12 volts DC. So you could go that route to remove all ground hum. Otherwise, plug everything into the same AC source that has a common ground.
Mickey?
Yeah, absolutely. What Courtney mentioned, put them within the same circuit that has a common ground. But first, do verify where that hum is coming from. Is the hum indeed coming through your power system? Or is it coming through an actual one of your audio inputs? Perhaps you have a DI on stage that's creating a hum, or a guitar on stage that's creating a hum. Verify first where that hum is coming from before you put in any solutions.
Yeah, it's just so you understand what happens here is that if you have two grounds and the potential is different between those grounds, so the voltage is slightly different between the grounds, it's using your audio cable to ground. It's moving. It's like, I'm going to go across here because it's always going to go to the lowest, the easiest way back home. And so having the same ground means that everybody has the same thing there. So you want to be careful of. You almost never want you want almost all your hardware to sit in the same ground all the time, and you pay attention to it. In fact, if you go to a hospital, you'll see different color outlets, and those are telling them where those grounds are. And so as they put them together, because it's super important for electronics and cows, as it turns out, to carefully manage your grounds. I know it sounds crazy, but the same problem you have with audio, cows have that problem. It goes right through their hooves, and they stop eating, and so and they don't do well. So it is, electricity is. We could probably do a whole second hour and just grounding, because stray voltage is a big deal. It's everywhere all the time, and it affects a lot of things. Yeah, go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, and also verify as well where the power sources are coming from. Say if you're in a larger production wherein you have multiple generators, each generator or sets of generators feeding different departments, and someone decided to put a power strip on the production office generator and you're on the audio generator, you might not have your day might not be as boring as you thought it might be.
You'll learn a lot about square waves and sine waves. Next question.
I desperately want to say how now, grounded cow, but I won't. And let's go on to the last question. Roscoe Jones.
There's a whole YouTube short in that. Okay, anyway, go ahead. Next question.
Indiana says, what are the limits on the types of audio signals that can be sent to an ATEM Mini as HDMI? Is also a consumer delivery connection that carries many different types of audio streams.
Mickey?
Yeah, on the ATEM Mini product line, it can only take PCM streams on channel 1 and 2 of the HDMI connection. HDMI can carry encoded audio streams, say the various flavors of Dolby, DTS, but it has to be a PCM audio stream within that HDMI connection.
Thank you so much. What a great panel today. We had a really fantastic panel. That was a deep dive. We didn't even get to the other half of the ATEM. So this is now turned into part 1. We'll find a part 2 where we answer more of your questions around the ATEM switcher. We haven't talked about processing at all. I saw the questions stacking up, and I knew that Jeff had more to say. But I was like, we better get through these questions, or we're going to get to the end of the hour, and we did. So we'll talk about that again. But great work, Jeff. Thank you so much for preparing some of the pieces there. Thanks to all the panelists for the great first hour and second hour. Remember that Wednesdays are our audio day, so if you've got audio questions, we've got some great experts to answer those questions. So thanks again to the panelists. Thanks to the producers watching the show, all of you watching the show. Thank you for the great questions that kept us going. We saw them building up. When you ask more questions at the very beginning of the second hour, we moved to your questions faster. So you can see that we reacted to that. So throw those questions in early, and thank you so much for all the great questions that you put in. And thanks to the development team and the management team and the production teams that all make this possible. There's a huge village that it takes to have this show happen. And we really appreciate the incredible effort that everyone puts into making this possible every single day, 7 days a week, through holidays, through all the other things. There's an incredible crew that makes this possible, and we thank everybody for their contribution. Today, if we had wandered around the Tlaloc Traversal, we would have gone 84,000 miles. That's 135,000 kilometers. And that is 662 million bananas for scale. All right, let's go ahead and jump into After Hours. I'm pretty sure that was the geekiest overview of an ATEM audio in the history of the world.
Ever done.
I have a question for Jeff.
Part 1.
Yeah,
Jeff,
exactly.
on the dynamics and ATEMs, am I correct in my observation that it seems like it reacts on RMS instead of peak?
That's my feeling too. I can't remember if I ever saw that in the manual.
Are you talking about the metering then on the?
No,
Yeah.
the dynamics, the compressors.
The compressors. Okay, yeah. I never
reacts on RMS instead of peak.
Yeah, that's difficult.
I don't mind it on the compressor, but limiter I think should be peak.
Limiters does the same thing.
Yeah, that's where it really is a problem.
See, folks, if you're listening, we still do talk about the stuff outside the show.
It's like
So maybe they should.
it's like
We
steering.
should suggest that as a firmware update.
Yeah, it's like steering the